Images of Auschwitz
Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor,
and Nazi attempts to annihilate the Jewish people were originally filmed almost entirely in black and white. But for the first time, some of these images are being transformed into color.
Colorizations can get the image closer to what it actually was.
I've seen it and I can't erase it in my mind.
Auschwitz is a story that should never be allowed to fade from memory.
It would take me 60 years before I could talk about what had happened there.
To survive, you have to avoid death many, many times. You die, you're done.
We were supposed to die.
Guerre avec les tziganes. Bon, on n'a commis aucun délit, on n'a commis aucun crime.
Anybody that survived the camp will live forever.
These photographs were originally shot in black and white and are part of a unique album of photos, shot by an official Auschwitz camp photographer. It is the only photographic record known to exist of Jews arriving at a Nazi extermination camp. It was discovered by chance soon after liberation by a Hungarian survivor named Lily Jacobs. Some of those in the photos were from the town of Bilke in Czechoslovakia.
I know that I was on the same train because I know that my family and I were on the same transport that the rabbi of Bilke was. He still had his beard because he didn't want to shave it while we were in the ghetto, even though they ordered all the Jews to shave it. My father was the cantor of the town, and he was very friendly with the rabbi. I recognized many Bilker there, but I didn't see anybody of my family. Here are the two brothers of Lily Jacobs who died in Auschwitz.
Auschwitz was only one of 6 extermination camps in a vast network of concentration camps in Nazi-occupied Europe. Apart from Jews, Roma, political enemies, homosexuals and disabled people were transported to Auschwitz. A new train platform was built in 1943 in anticipation of a surge of close to 500,000 Hungarian Jews that would arrive over a 2-month period in the spring of 1944.
Here we see 2 columns, women and children, and man separately, also in another column.
Decisions about who would live and who would die will be made in an instant, with camp physician Dr. Joseph Mengele often playing God.
Women to the left, men to the right, make 4 rows of 5.
They seem to have been obsessed that immediately people should form into rows of 5.
Giving orders, get out, line up in row of 5. My mother, my sister, my niece, my aunt, myself, and my aunt's little children, 2, 4, and 6 in front of us.
We always had to line up rows of 5. And my brother Joseph always tried to make sure to line up in the same row of 5. And this went on for months and months. We heard sometimes that families were separated at the roll call. One night in the middle of the night, they woke us up, and in the confusion, we did not line up in the same line. An SS officer came and he started to count. 1, 2, 3, meaning 1, 2, 3, above face. They took me and the rest of it to the train station, and that was the last time that I saw my brother.
They tried to take a child from a mother. They wanted the mother, but they didn't want the child. And she started screaming, and the assessment ran towards her. I made a move from my queue, went over to the side where fitter people are being selected, because I knew the older you are, the more chances you have for them to take you to work. A hairdresser called us in, and they shaved our heads off.
The fright, the degradation, for young girls like ourselves, possibly even our mother didn't see us undressed. We had to sit there naked for men shaving our heads. You couldn't believe that was actually happening to you.
Jewish prisoners had yellow stars stitched to their uniforms. It was part of a color-coded scheme of sewn-on triangles used for prisoner ID. Green was for criminals, pink for those deemed to be pedophiles, rapists, and gays, red for political prisoners. Black triangles were for drug addicts, prostitutes, and Roma.
Here is a picture of some Bilker Jews arriving in Auschwitz, and I know their names. This is David Heisler, and there are 2 brothers, Berger, Yaakov. Some people were dressed in Shabbat clothing because they wanted to look nice.
We lost our name from that day onwards, B7608.
When I could see the people before me were wincing because they weren't very gentle with those needles. So whether he broke the needle or whether he had no ink, I don't know. I don't know. But I just walked round the back and took up the line as we were walking away, and nobody realized that I hadn't got a number.
They ran out of ink. So they sent somebody off with ink, but in the meantime, there were so many of us, there were actually trains queuing up. They just pushed us through. So I didn't get tattoo, that's why.
I didn't get my tattoo, and when I asked, they told me
They don't want to waste the ink on me. I'm going to the gas chamber.
The long row of people along the top edge of this photograph are on their way to their deaths.
The only way we could tell the passing of the time that once a week we were taken to be showered. And the showers with the gas chamber were side by side, and until cold water came down, you didn't realize whether it was going to be gas or water, whether we were going to live or not. Only when cold water came down, you realized you were going to live probably for another week.
After arriving at Auschwitz, if you had your photo taken, you were among the lucky ones and temporarily escaped death. When the Nazis ultimately faced defeat, orders were given to incinerate all the prison photos. Those orders were disobeyed, and nearly 40,000 prison photos survived. The financial cost of mass murder at Auschwitz would be more than covered by the systematic looting of those Jews about to die.
This is the bundles that we brought from the ghetto. They loaded them on trucks, took it to a big warehouse where they sorted out what they found.
90% going to the gas chamber. 10% put them to work for the war effort.
Auschwitz had 40 subcamps. About 10 of them were devoted to making arms for the Nazi war machine.
As an 11-year-old, I was making food for the military. As a 12-year-old, I was making armament for the military.
"500 women were chosen to work in an ammunition factory.
Sent me to work in the armament factory. We were making machine gun bullets.
The factory was devoted entirely to one product. The anti-aircraft gun, Flak something 38.
We made bombs and grenades.
So you had to file off any rust. But if you filed off too much, then it got loose in the case, didn't fit in the case. So tremendous facilities of sabotaging there.
You had to put it in and turn it round and round. And if it went smoothly, that means that the gun solution had settled and they were ready. But very often they didn't go round smoothly, but we still send them through.
I don't think I made any of mine ever made it. The factory owners paid the German government a mark a day for every one of us. First time we were worth something.
Built beside Auschwitz was Germany's largest chemical industrial complex, IG Farben. It produced synthetic rubber for the Nazi military. One of its subsidiaries produced Zyklon B. The gas used to kill hundreds of thousands. The company relied on an expendable labor pool of workers from Auschwitz.
They took my blood many, many times. When I asked, "Why do you take my blood?" And he said, "To aid the German soldiers so we can win the war and take over the world." Heute Deutschland und morgen the ganze world. And I said to myself, "Are you stupid? With my blood, you're never gonna win the war."
Our meal consisted of one slice of rock-hard black bread and 1 cup of painted water. And that was for 24 hours.
Their plan was, they called it Vernichtung durch Hunger. Destruction through hunger. People developed 3 different philosophies of how to eat this little portion of bread. Some of them took it and just ate a crumb and hid the rest in their bosom. Others cut it into 3 pieces, one for breakfast, one for lunch, and one for supper. And there were others that ate it at once, because if you ate it, it was secure in your stomach, because there were prisoners who used to attack you and take the bread from you.
Food was constantly on our brain. I think the hunger, you never forget it.
I visualized that in Auschwitz, my mother doing the challah and make her noodles, and she did it so fast that I thought she was going to hurt her fingers, but she never did.
We could smell. We could smell and dream of the wonderful dinners that we had, of the wonderful food, particularly on Friday night, the chicken soup and the fresh challahs and all of that.
Having an imaginary feast with fellow prisoners wouldn't prevent starving to death, but it would help preserve your sanity and your humanity. A 12-year-old child, Nurit Stern, in the Ravensbrück concentration camp, secretly wrote down some of the recipes she overheard the adults fantasizing about. Chopped liver, goulash, stuffed cabbage, cholent, and kishka.
Now we were dreaming about food, we were talking about food, and reminiscing about home.
I was assigned to work with horses, and it had some advantages. A, you were outside, so you weren't cooped up someplace. But the other advantage was the fact that horses get fed. Horses can't speak. So if you take some of their food, they can't tell anybody. And of course, oats are not very edible for man, but they got supplemental stuff like sugar beets. They have a slight problem. If you eat a lot of raw sugar beets, you get dysentery, which is deadly. However, if you bake them or cook them or boil them, so all we had to do is find a place to have a barbecue. We had a blacksmith. And of course, a blacksmith has fire. You took 2 sugar beets, went to the blacksmith, one for him and one for you.
They had dreams of eating and all sorts of different things, yes. And people died next to me. We were 10 people on a bunk, and during the night, 1 or 2 died. They came with a cart in the morning, took the bodies out, threw them on the cart, and took them to crematorium.
There was love in Auschwitz among us. If you were just for the me, you didn't make it. We were a family of inmates. We had to care for each other.
In defiance of women stripped of their humanity by the Nazis, Edith proposed a competition among her friends for the nicest breasts. A boob contest.
We were doing many things there, silly things, joking, and the boob contest was designed that somebody is going to have a little piece of the bread. And I won, but I didn't eat it alone. I shared it with everyone.
The people are so hungry that they literally engage in cannibalism. It is unbelievable to believe that human beings can be so terribly hungry as to cut a human being.
Cannibalism broke out, and people were eating other people's flesh.
Camp next to us, there was a hedge of about 10 feet, so we couldn't see. That's where the Dutch Jews were there. They were not fed anymore. No water, nothing. That they were eating the dead. They were cutting off from here, from the thigh. That's the only place where they still had some meat. That's where Anne Frank died.
Because I was talking to God to please help me. I was so hungry, and I'm not going to touch human flesh, and God told me to look down, and I realized I had grass to eat. We truly did everything in our power not to be dehumanized.
Before we arrived, our barracks were taken up by gypsies with the whole families.
On one occasion, saw Romani women with, in their original clothes, breaking stones on the way when we were going to go to the showers.
In August of 1944, to make space in Auschwitz for the expected flood of Hungarian Jews, over 4,000 Roma in the so-called Gypsy family camp were murdered.
Several days before I arrived, they were taken to the gas chambers and the crematoriums, and they were all burned, and we took their barracks.
Commencement 43, j'ai été déporté en Allemagne.
Raymond Guerem, a French Romani, worked in his father's traveling circus until his entire family was arrested in occupied France in 1941. He was eventually deported to a Nazi work camp outside Frankfurt.
Voilà, j'ai appris qu'il y avait des tziganes et des gens qui étaient gazés à Auschwitz, parce que c'est les gardiens eux-mêmes qui nous l'avaient dit. C'est là qu'on a su qu'ils les mettaient dans les fours à gaz, quoi. Mais on le savait, parce que le directeur du camp lui disait. Moi, il m'avait dit, toi, le prochain, tu seras sur ma liste. Alors, je savais que s'il ne m'évadait pas, j'allais à Auschwitz. Et en 1944, au mois de juin, j'ai réussi à m'évader de l'Allemagne et je suis revenu en France. Et c'est là que je me suis engagé dans la résistance. J'avais 18 ans à peine. Quand j'étais dans la résistance, il y avait des Polonais, des Espagnols, des Français, des gens du voyage. Il y avait même des Allemands qui désertaient, qui venaient se mettre comme résistants. On n'aurait pas dit, toi, tu es un juif, toi, tu es un... Ça ne se disait pas là-bas.
Even inside Auschwitz, there was resistance. The crematorium workers, known as the Sonderkommandos, lived and breathed the mass killings daily.
These people knew what was happening. They knew, they worked in the gas chambers, they worked in the shower rooms, and very often they had to drag their own families out of the shower rooms into the gas chambers.
These workers smuggled in a camera and risked their lives to take several photos of bodies being burnt and a group of naked women about to be gassed. The film was smuggled out to the resistance in a tube of toothpaste.
I'm again out in the field plowing fields, and suddenly I hear this huge boom. I see smoke coming out from an area where the gas chambers are.
The people which work in the gas chambers in crematorium 4 revolted, and one of the gas chambers were blown up.
How do you get explosives in Auschwitz?
The ladies from the ladies' camp, they work in an ammunition factory.
Gram by gram, smuggled out explosives to the people who were involved in actually doing all the physical labor necessary to get the bodies into the oven and all this other stuff. And the leader of that group was a woman by the name of Rosa Robota.
Rosa was from Ciechnau, Poland. She joined the underground resistance movement after Germany invaded Poland. She arrived in Auschwitz in 1942. The 1944 prisoner revolt also left 3 SS officers dead.
But they were caught, and all the girls were hanged in Auschwitz.
The camp had to watch. They saw these females being murdered.
You do everything in your power to stay alive. People either attack the guards and they were shot right away, or they touched the barbed wires and they were electrocuted.
I never thought or tried to escape, because people who tried to escape, they hanged them. And we had to stand around in a square, watch them being hanged. That will happen to you if you escaped.
A young boy was hung because he picked some bit of food up. Yeah.
There were over 900 escape attempts from Auschwitz, with almost 200 prisoners successfully breaking out.
My parents were transferred from at least 3 camps. They went to camps where they were poisoned with doing chemicals for bombs, and they were making munitions. They went to munition camps.
For 2 years, Esther's parents, Abraham and Anna, survived together in brutal work camps in Poland.
My parents knew that at this point they were going to be separated in August 1944. So they wanted to be together. They wanted to say goodbye. They had this young man who watched out for them. They would have some time together.
By the age of 7, I've seen more dead people than live people. Because in the camp, every morning, I've seen between 800 and 1,200 corpses. That did not mean anything. People lost hope, and if you lose hope, and you're already starved, you just go down, lay down, and you die. You know that tomorrow and the next day is going to be the same. Eventually, they're going to kill you. If not them, their starvation is going to kill you. So why suffer another day?
I think I was angry, all the time angry, and I think that's what kept me going, being angry about it. Because there was no right for this to happen.
I questioned if there is a God. 11 years old, I went in my first camp. And then I went to Lodz Ghetto, was on my own. And then I went to Auschwitz, and I went to Buchenwald. What on earth did I do?
There was a debate between those that believe in God and those that didn't believe in God. Where was God that allowed a thing like this to happen?
I shook my fist at God. I was told many times, where was God in Auschwitz? And I say, God did not kill my parents. People did.
I've lost 80 people from my family, cousins, uncles, everybody. And what did they do?
I lost everyone except my sister Magda. My whole family was wiped out. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles.
the failure of man, and the enigma of God's silence.
Maybe God made a mistake of giving man free will.
If God was omnipotent, Holocaust wouldn't happen. But God is omniscient. He knows everything that goes on. And I can see him wringing his head, by God, what have I done to make humans like this?
It was a contest between who was going to come earlier, the death or the Americans.
We couldn't envisage what the end was going to be, what was going to happen to us.
There were rumors that the Americans are coming closer. As we heard in the distance, the duel of the artillery.
My mother got a message out to my father because the camps were not that far away initially in Buchenwald. They were near Leipzig. So there was some people that were going from one camp to the other. So she got a message and said, "You have reason to live." And he understood that to mean that she was pregnant. And his brother, who was in camp with him, said, "What did you do to her? What a horrible thing to do. She can get killed." A pregnant woman was not a situation that was survivable. It was immediate death. Pregnancy was immediate death.
In the summer of 1944, a massive Soviet offensive threatened to overrun Nazi strongholds throughout Poland.
The Russian army is getting close. They're within 50 miles.
Concentration camp commanders across Poland were ordered to evacuate with prisoners and head to the German interior.
They took us on a death march.
The reason it's called a death march is because you either march or you die.
Anybody who couldn't march, couldn't follow, was shot, and the body was thrown on the side of the road.
Some of us were very sick, and we didn't know whether we will make it.
I was about to stop. I was getting weaker and weaker. The girls that I shared the bread with formed a chair with their arms, and they carried me so I wouldn't die. Isn't that amazing?
Friends grabbed me in a fireman's lift and put me in the center of the column and dragged me along. Literally saved my life.
People who were too weak or too old or too sick, who couldn't go on a forced march, were put in a basement in an infirmary and left. And that was my mother.
The Nazi regime was reluctant to give up its prisoners in the belief they might still be useful in armament factories.
They still believed, even in January 1945, that they will somehow win the war.
There was a possibility prisoners could be used as a bargaining chip to save the Nazi regime. And they also didn't want stories of mass murder revealed to the rest of the world.
When we came to Buchenwald, only 400 of us, of 10,000, remained alive, and I was one of them. The Buchenwald command got an order to eliminate the entire camp. There were 80,000 prisoners in Buchenwald at that time. 60,000 prisoners were executed. Now came our turn, the children's barrack. Just before we reached the gate, the sirens started to sound. The Germans closed the gates and they ran for cover.
The tables had turned.
It was beginning to dawn on us that we hadn't seen a German now for a day or maybe two. There was a barbed wire. We were told that there was high voltage in the wire, and some Jew was desperate enough to throw himself at the high voltage fence, only to discover that there was no high voltage.
All the guards disappeared. And 3 o'clock in the afternoon on April 11th, 1945, 2 American soldiers walked into my barracks. The Messiah just arrived.
Our train was taken into Theresienstadt. It was a ghetto of German Jews and Czech Jews, and we were liberated 4 days later by the Russian army. We had typhoid, had all sorts of diseases.
We heard the sound of a tank, very large sound. We thought they're going to kill us there. The first thing we noticed is the turret was not aimed at us. And the soldier jumped out. My father yelled, "Americans." The American soldier was a Jew, and he was from Brooklyn. He was our Messiah. And everybody singing and yelling and hooting and so forth. By then I was 8 years old.
One beautiful spring morning, it was April 15. We woke up, there's daylight, and there are these soldiers in a different uniform. And they said, "You are free." I spoke English. I said, "Are you sure you are not disguised Germans?" "No, you are free."
The German soldiers threw the rifles away. There was church bells ringing and white sheets hanging out from the windows. And the little girl came to me, and with a hand like this, and in her hand was a painted egg. And she says, "It's Easter Sunday." 40 days and 40 nights in Auschwitz-Birkenau, we liberated Easter Sunday. Can't make it up, can you?
In early May of 1945, a tank unit of the American 71st Infantry entered Austria on its way to Berlin. They arrived at a sub-camp of Mauthausen at Gunniskirchen. The German officers had already fled.
I was not really fully humanly a 17-year-old girl. I was among the dead. And then I looked up, and it was a man. I saw tears in the eyes and M&Ms in the hand. I was liberated by a black person. I never saw a black person before that.
The US Army was still segregated. The soldiers in the 761st Tank Unit were predominantly African American.
3 American tanks and a jeep broke through the gate, and they came into the camp. The chaplain came into the children's barrack, and he said in Yiddish, "Jiddische Kinder, ihr seid frei. Jewish children, you are free." I was 16 years old. The day of liberation was my happiest day and my saddest day, because I found out that nobody's around. I'm the only one that at that time that I knew that was alive.
We thought we shall be reunited with the men of the family, and we didn't realize that they were already dead, that they had been dead for years by then.
When they came to Bergen-Belsen, they found 13,000 corpses. On the ground, there was barely room to walk.
Contaminated barracks were burnt to the ground to contain the spread of disease, and bulldozers moved bodies into mass graves.
Allied forces, the U.S. 2nd Division, came in and liberated the camp. A day before the liberation of the camp, I was born.
On a gagné, faut le dire vite, hein. Qu'est-ce qu'on a gagné? Pas grand-chose. On a défendu la France. Mais le remerciement, qu'est-ce qu'on a eu? Je regrette pas, moi, de m'avoir inscrit dans la... Je fais partie de la résistance. Mais au moins qu'on le reconnaisse.
Actually, I was surprised it didn't happen before. Western Pennsylvania is the largest concentration of white supremacist groups.
11 people have been killed in the American city of Pittsburgh after a gunman opened fire in a synagogue.
This is the most horrific crime scene I've seen in 22 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Members of the Tree of Life Synagogue conducting a peaceful service.
The day that it happened, I came to synagogue, and as an ex-soldier, the instinct, I hear shooting, I gotta find out where it comes from. I moved my head to the passenger side, and I was facing him, eye to eye. But I guess he figured that I don't pose a threat to him, so he didn't shoot me. Because he said, all Jews must die, why didn't he shoot me? So I survived. Double survival. The worst of the worst happened to me already. My family went through a lifetime of pain, and we don't need it anymore.
When I came to America and I worked in a factory, I always went to the colored bathroom. I joined the NAACP, I marched with Martin Luther King. See, love is not what you feel, it's what you do. Best news I can give you that my grandson's wife is expecting twins. So I'm going to have 6 great grandchildren, the best revenge to Hitler.
It is my legacy that I was born in a camp. It's a possibility that I will be the last survivor alive, last living survivor of the Holocaust. It's possible.